Welcome to the cardiovascular device webinar. Uh, my name is Nikhil. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for medical devices at Eklvar. My background is I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I've previously worked with TÜV Sud, which is a notified body, and currently I offer my services to Eklvar to help with their CRO, and also I'm the clinical lead for Milo. We have Dr. Adiogo Olusan with us on the panel today, and we also have Dr. Oscar Garza Villarreal and Obuchinesia Anyanwu. They will address different topics throughout the webinar. Okay, next slide. All right. So who we are, Eklvar MedTech is a specialty digital services company. We provide contract research services, and also we offer clinical trial software applications to the medical device industry. Eklvar was founded in October 2020 to focus on the new EU MDR for the CE marking and also help with the post-market data collection. We offer a complete suite of services for including pre-market and post-market clinical trials. We have another solution called Milo Healthcare. This provides bespoke sort of services to run a clinical trial right from patient screening, enrollment to data analysis and collection. This is in summary what we do. So we offer clinical reporting services as well as we conduct clinical trials. We help with clinical evidence generation. We have operational team in Germany, UK, France, Spain, and with the reporting services, we handle all the discussion with the notified bodies and get your devices on the market. So our core services are we do clinical evaluation reporting, we offer PMCF activities, we engage in pre-market clinical trials, we offer decentralized clinical trial services and also help with the insurance reimbursement. So as you can see, cardiology remains one of our top priorities. It forms 15% of our share of business along with orthopedics and critical care services. Another important branch is wound care and urology. And you can see spine services are also a major chunk of our business. These are some of the companies which we have worked with, notably Bausch & Lomb, Hartmann, and many others. So these are the different sites across where we operate. We have a base in Japan as well. We engage with many customers and clients in Japan. We have services in Germany, United Kingdom, and the France. And we are establishing increased presence all over Europe into Italy, Poland, and Spain as well. Now I introduce you to our next speaker, Adi, I fondly call him, but he's Dr. Adiogo Olusan, who will speak on one of the topics. I'll hand it over to him. Adi, if you can share your slides. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the organizers of this webinar and inviting me to talk on this meeting today. I am Dr. Adiogo Olusan. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Diagnostic Medical Research here in the United Kingdom. I'm also the Senior Physician Investigator as well as the expert in cardiovascular studies for this company. In addition to this, my background, I'm a structural and interventional cardiologist and recently completed my structural fellowship at Glenfield Hospital in Leicester. In terms of the innovation devices in cardiovascular medicine, I'm just going to briefly talk about 9 different things. There are loads of devices, but time will not permit us to go through this. So I'll be talking through atrial fibrillation detection devices, device for coronary blood flow assessment, advanced heart failure monitoring, treatment for refractory angina, leadless pacemaker, electrical appendage closure device, transcatheter air-to-edge repair, and aortic valve implantation. So, and of course, my final slide will feature direction, which I think things will go over the next couple of years. So, in terms of atrial fibrillation, we know that the prevalence of AF is about 2 to 4%, and this is expected to increase over the next decade to about 3 to by 2 to 3 fold. This is due to increasing population age, increasing cardiovascular burden and comorbidities, and improved awareness, as well as detection, new technology for detection of AF. There have been very serious several studies looking into wearable devices, as well as some smartphone photoplastic sonography, which I'll be starting with the Basel wearable study. This is a non-randomized prospective study which was published in 2024. It included about 201 patients, and 31% were female. And the rate of detecting AF in this study was about 31%. And they looked at comparing patients of high-lead single-lead ECG from these wearable devices compared to double-lead ECG. And of course, some of the things they highlighted in this study was about 202 conclusive single-lead ECGs from the study. But as time went by, from the first quintile to the fifth quintile, there was reduction in the rate of inconclusive ECG, but this was not statistically significant, perhaps due to short time of observation or due to insufficient improvement in AI algorithms that were improved over time. But this is the main validation study which is done in Switzerland, and this was published in 2023. And of course, some of the 5 different smartwatches were looked into, which include Apple, Samsung, Withings, Fitbit, and RI4. The sensitivity for each of the devices shown on the screen, and the specificity as well. Something I would like to mention on this slide will be the preferred choice. Most patients actually prefer to use Apple device, which I don't know the reason why, but that's quite interesting to know, perhaps due to preference of participants in the study. There's quite good heart rate spread within the studies. However, the Withings device didn't show anything in heart rate. And of course, the Apple device was quite expensive, as you can see. And when you look into the sensitivity and specificity of these devices, compare the single-lead ECG from each of the devices to 12-lead gold standard ECG, there was quite significant difference between the specificity and the sensitivity of each device. The Apple and Samsung was almost similar. Of course, there was significant differences between them. But once you now exclude the inconclusive ECGs, you can see there was no difference between them, and it showed that these devices are really, really good at picking up atrial fibrillation and excluding atrial fibrillation as well. And moving on to the mobile application devices. So this basically they use mobile devices, and there's an app which helps to detect. It reflects light on the index finger, and it picks up the red blood cell flow within the vessel, and from there it picks up the heart rate and give you some information. And these devices actually they use. So these are the pictures it looks like, and then they use there's a MAS score, which is the mobile application rating score. So a score of above 3 shows the app is really good. And from this particular study, there are 12 apps that were included in this study, and essentially inclusion criteria were apps that were free, apps that were in English language, and also apps that actually detect atrial fibrillation. So if you can see from the first bar chart here, only 5 of these apps actually scored above 3. So that's the overall score. And when we look at the IS score based on the MAS score, the qualities, I mean, in terms of qualities of this app, the ones that score highest are at aesthetics, behavioral change, and functionality. The lowest score was scored for behavioral change, engagement, and subject quality. But it is worth mentioning that there's the role of photoplexismography in detecting AF, and as well as assessing AF burden and bringing out reduction stroke rates is still not clear. So there's still more studies that need to be worked up in this area. And moving on to smart cardio device. This is a special device that you put on the left pectoral, it could be on the right pectoral as well. This is with a patch you put on your chest, and it's attached to the mobile phone. You can look at it remotely. Continuous monitoring of the ECG, and the complete study, particular study, is a non-randomized study which looked at it compared both auto monitor and the smart cardiac device. Essentially, it's a study that contained about 40 patients, and it's actually matched really well with standard auto monitoring. So there's no significant difference between auto monitors. However, some of the highlights that I would like to flag up to us is the rate of picking up ventricular trigeminy, which is extra beats in more than 4 beats of extra beats in ventricle, or more than 4 beats of supraventricular trigeminy as well. It's actually good for the smart cardio device, which is quite good. So I think this might be the future in this area, but I think there are more data that needs to come on in this area. When we compare it to average heart rate spread between both devices, they're both matching, as you can see on the chart on the screen. So it's really quite good. Next, I'm going to go to coronary blood flow. So in terms of coronary blood flow, we know historically there's been multiple groundbreaking trials that we've done over the years, which looked into the fractional flow reserve, which we call the FFR. This is an hyperemic index, which tends to look at the rates. It gives you, there's a cutoff margin for that predicts significant stenosis in coronary angiography. So any score above 0.8 is normal. Anything less than 0.8 is significantly severe. There have been other non-hyperemic indexes, which are the DFR, the RFR, the IFR, which are using non-hyperemic indexes, but you still have to put a pressure sensor wire down the coronary arteries. Of course, these are all invasive, and it comes with the risk of complications and stuff like that. So the TFR comes on the back heel of these ones. You don't need to put any coronary wire. You don't need to put any invasive wire down the coronary arteries. You take your pictures, your coronary angiography in two orthogonal views using at least projection of 25 degrees difference. And then it computes these images onto a 3D software. And then it gives you the rate of flow, which I'm going to show in the next couple of slides. There's a first study for the KFR, which is the pilot study, which is done in Netherlands. And this showed the specificity was about 90% to stenosis, but sensitivity of picking up stenosis was about 74%. This was followed up the next year by Favor 2 trial, which is non-randomized trial as well. And then you can see the specificity and sensitivity had improved. And then the number of minutes required to perform a KFR test was about 4.8 minutes, whereas for the standard FFR, it will take about 7 minutes. So about 30% reduction in time. I think in a good and very experienced operator, I would do an FFR within 5 minutes, but from this study, it mentioned 7 minutes. Okay, moving on to another study in this aspect, which is the non-randomized study. It is a passive Asia study which looked into the rate comparing KFR and RFR. And essentially, it contains 770 patients. They looked at the vessel-oriented composite endpoints at 6 months. And this includes rate of cardiac death, vessel-related myocardial infarction, or ischemia during intravenous vessel revascularization. And it actually was shown to be better than just visual coronary angiography. However, I would like to mention in this slide, it's just a picture for you to understand, so you can understand where I'm coming from. This is the left anterior descending artery, and it has picked up the significant stenosis there with the arrow, and wherever you see red means significant stenosis. On the yellow, that's where the stenosis is. And the TFR here was 0.74. Like I mentioned, anything below 0.8 is significant. But after stenting, they performed the KFR again, and you can see the KFR had improved to 0.96, so showing that the stenosis has actually been treated. But this is a non-randomized study from the Pacific Asia study. However, we now add a randomized study in this area, which is called the Favor 3 trial, performed in Europe, and this was published November last year. And unfortunately, they looked at, it was a non-inferiority trial looking at comparing with standard FFR, but it did not meet the non-inferiority margin. And of course, the summary was that it's when you have an FFR, you don't need to perform a KFR. If you don't have an FFR facility in your unit, you can do a KFR. So I think that's the summary from there. Moving on to the next device, in terms of heart failure, advanced heart failure monitoring, we know that increase in pulmonary artery is a surrogate marker for heart failure decompensation. There's something we call the RVRA, the right ventricle pulmonary artery coupling. So once the PA pressure goes up, the right ventricle overworks itself, and that can lead to decompensation. So yes, so this device is there to pick up when the pulmonary pressure is going up. And of course, you can then optimize patients using diuretics to try and prevent them from coming to hospital. There's been multiple randomized trials, which I'll be talking about today. The first one was done in 2011, as you can see on the screen, and they randomized about 550 patients into this study. And they brought in patients with NYHA class 3. That means patients who are breathless, walking distance of about 200 meters. So not that much, but they are quite breathless. And then they recruited into this study, and they look at the efficacy primary endpoint, which includes rate of heart failure within related hospitalization at 6 months. And the safety endpoint was looking at freedom from device-related complication. And essentially, there was a 39% reduction rate in hospitalization for heart failure in this patient using the CardioMEM device. And this was followed up with another trial called the Guide Half HF trial. This was published in 2022. This is a larger trial containing about 1,000 patients, and they recruited the patient between NYHA class 2 and NYHA class 4. And of course, they look at almost similar endpoints as well. But of course, this trial was conducted during COVID period as well. And when they look at the results, if you factor in COVID, there was no effect from the use of cardiomems in reducing hospitalization from heart failure. But when you look at the patients who were recruited before COVID, it actually showed that there was about 28% reduction in heart failure hospitalization in this patient. So the cardiomem is a good device, I think, and it will change management in this patient population. And this is followed up with another study called the Monitor HF trial, which was published just last year in August. And this is a less number of patients, about 348 patients. And it's an open label randomized clinical trial, which was performed in Netherlands. And they recruited patients with NYHA class 2. They looked at patients who had previous hospitalization for heart failure, emergency visit with requirement for intravenous diuretics. And of course, the trial did show that cardiomems actually improve the quality of life, improves patient clinical and pulmonary artery pressure endpoints, in particular in patients with chronic heart failure. So I think the cardiomems is going to change a lot of, a lot of practice in future. I'm moving on to coronary arteries. The coronary sinus reducer is a device that we use. We've been using it the last 5 years or so. And we're using it in patients who have no target for revascularization. When I talk about revascularization, I mean patients that require stenting or even bypass. So if you don't have a vessel that can be, or maybe all your coronary epicardial vessels have been stented, and there's no more recipe for stenting, and you still have angina. So we know this kind of patient, they suffer from microvascular angina, so they might need some other treatment. So in this kind of patients, the coronary sinus reducer is a good device that has been shown to be effective in them. I'm going to show this in the next couple of slides. This is a special stent, and it's like an hourglass. It's got a big end on the left side and a smaller end on the right side. Essentially, what happens is when the blood flow comes to the coronary sinus, okay? The coronary sinus is a bigger vein that receives all blood coming from the all greater cardiac vein and small cardiac veins from the heart. So allow that to go into the right atrium, and then blood flows and continue like that within cardiac circulation. So we put a stent in the coronary sinus, we reduce the flow of blood coming through, and the rate the blood flowing out of the device is reduced. What happens is when there's a lot of backup along this area, it's increased more tissue delivery of oxygen into the myocardium, and that improves the angina symptoms. There's been a study called the Orbital Cosmic Trial, which was published in 2024 in Lancet. So it was a small population trial, but it's a randomized control. It contains about 61 patients, and it was performed here in the UK with 6 centers involved. They looked at the rate of myocardial blood flow and also looked at number of daily angina episodes that patients suffer from after getting the reducer device. And essentially, there was no difference between myocardial blood flow. We know that because this is all due to small vessel ischemia. So it's not going to improve the bigger vessel in terms of blood flow. But when you look at the rate of angina symptoms, the red is the number of severity of angina symptoms. They have number of episodes of angina. As you can see, this placebo arm, there's more red than the yellow. The yellow is the number of less amount frequency of angina episodes. So as you can see, the coronary sinus reducer was shown to actually improve the frequency, less frequency of angina in these patients. And this is a chart to demonstrate this as well. From the implant size, about 6 months after the study, you can see there was improvement in angina symptoms over time. So I think this is also going to be more, it's been adopted now, and only more interventions are trying to adopt to try and implant this device. Moving on to leadless pacemaker. Traditionally, in patients with bradycardia weakness, with complete heart block or high degree of node block, which increases mortality risk, traditionally we always put in a transvenous pacing system, which is the first picture we got here. And essentially what it does is they go through the pectoral area under the left pectoral muscle. We put a pocket there, put a device there, but before you put the 2 wires, which is the leads, and this leads, one of them goes in the right atrium, and the left second one goes to the right ventricle. And then they are both attached to this, we call it the battery. And then of course the battery has a lifespan, so it could last 5 years or 10 years, depending on how long you use it. And that means you have to change the battery as well. However, if you put this kind of device in a young patient, let's say 45 or 50-year-old person, there might be risk of complication down the line, meaning that there might be need for you to remove the pacing lead, which comes with high risk of complication. So that's where the rationale comes in with using a special device called the Micra. And this was developed by Medtronic. So what it does is the size of the capsule, vitamin capsule, and it got like these 4 pins. So they put this in the right ventricle and the pin go into the muscle, and it stays there, it does the same pacing. And they looked at a study, there's been a study, this is the registry data published early last year, and this looked at is a propensity matching study that looks at the rate of complication from this device compared to transvenous pacing, and they look at the rate of the systemic revision as well. And as you can see, this is just the data set for the patients, and from the graph, from the rate of complication, major complication rate at about 5 years. For transvenous pacing was 8.5, and for Micra was 4.5, which is about 53% rate reduction in major complication, and similar number for the systemic revision rate as well. So the Micra is actually good, and in Leicester, where I did my structural fellowship, many of my device colleagues are already adopting this. They're doing this leadless pacemakers. So I think it's going to be the future now. Of course, there'll be a niche for other special device like the subcut ICDs, but I'm not going to talk about today. Next one is the appendage closure device, which we do for specific patient population who have atrial fibrillation, and particularly the patient who have cerebral amyloid. For atrial fibrillation, we put them on anticoagulation to prevent the risk of stroke. For patients who have cerebral amyloid, they have higher risk of bleeding from this amyloid angiopathy. Similarly, the guidelines recommended also including patients who don't tolerate anticoagulation, like they have upper GI bleed or massive GI bleed from anticoagulation. So in this kind of subset of patients with AF, they are eligible for left atrial appendage closure. In the UK, there are lots of devices. I mean, worldwide, there are a lot of devices we use, but in the UK particularly, we use the Watchman Flex device and the AMOLED device, which are new devices from both Boston Scientific and Abbott, respectively. And there's been a few studies that looked into this effectiveness of these devices. I'll be starting about the Pinnacle Flex trial, which is for the Boston Scientific. This is non-randomized trial, which contained about 400 patients. And they looked at the safety endpoint, which includes the occurrence of death, ischemic stroke, systemic embolism, and device-related complication, which require cardiac surgery within 7 days of implant. Essentially, this effectiveness endpoint was to look at the effectiveness of the left appendage closure device and to see if there's any leak around the device. And essentially, they set a performance goal at 4.21 for the safety endpoint. And of course, the result of this study showed that it met the safety endpoint was 0.5, which was statistically significant because it was below the performance margin, which is quite good. It showed that it was quite safe in summary. And also it showed that it's quite effective because it surpasses the performance goal that was set for this study. Moving on to a different study which compare head-to-head comparison between the AMOLED device and the Watchman Flex device. Particularly, it's not the Watchman, it's the Watchman 2.5, which is the precursor towards the Watchman Flex. And this is a randomized trial which is head-to-head, and it contains about 1,800 patients. And they looked at endpoints over 5 years. And the endpoint was to look at the comparative risk rate of ischemic stroke between both devices, rate of systemic embolism, rate of major bleeding when they are still on anticoagulation, or number of cardiovascular death as well. Of course, when you compare those outcomes, as you can see from the chart here, there was no difference between these outcomes in both devices. However, when we look at the number of those patients that come off anticoagulation after appendage closure device, it was 91% for Watchman device and it was 94%. So both devices are shown to actually reduce, get you towards coming off anticoagulation, but there's higher rate of stopping anticoagulation in the AMOLED device. This is because of the disc, which is quite broader, covers the limitation for the Watchman device is the disc itself doesn't cover from the Coumadin ridge around the left appendage, left atrial appendage. The Coumadin ridge is not only mostly covered, so we tend to put these patients that are not covered well with anticoagulation. Whereas for the AMOLED, the bigger disc, you would, as you can see from this slide here, the bigger disc here covers it quite well. So that's why most people came up anticoagulation at 5 years. Moving on to the next device, we're going into more interventional procedures now. Head-to-head repair, which is reserved for secondary mitral regurgitation or tricuspid regurgitation. These are not primary. It's not due to the valve, but due to either LV dilatation, annular dilatation, or atrial functional MR, which we call the atrial dilatation causing functional MR because of malcoaptation of the leaflets. So in this population, there's been previous study that's been done before this, including the QUAP trial, which is a landmark trial from 2018, randomized trial, which showed that putting a mitral plate in this patient actually reduced hospitalization for heart failure and also prevent cardiovascular death. The same year, a separate randomized trial, which is called the mitral FR trial, came out and did show that it was negative trial. So essentially, what if you look at the phenotype of the population, they're different. For QUAP trial, there were more patients that were more sick, more dilated LV, more severe MR, and more effective orifice regurgitant area compared to the mitral or the mitral FR trial, which they have less dilatation of the LV. They included a patient with moderate to severe MR, not purely severe MR, and there was no defective orifice area was 0.31 compared to 0.4 for the QUAP trial. So there was a bit of difference there. And then there's been a study which has actually looked at the effect of comparing head-to-head repair with isolated mitral valve surgery. And this is a French registry data, which I've just included here, published last year, March. And it did show that there were about 2,160 patients matched propensity matching score compared to isolated mitral valve surgery. And then over a period of about 3 years, it's been shown that it reduced cardiovascular death, pacemaker implantation, and reduced the rate of stroke. However, in this edge repair device patients, there's higher risk of non-cardiovascular death, cardiac arrest, pulmonary edema in this population. Whereas in both populations, there was no difference in terms of all-cause mortality or endocarditis or major bleeding or myocardial infarction or even the rate of atrial fibrillation. There was no difference in this population. And this is the Kaplan-Meier score chart for the cardiovascular death, as you can appreciate. It starts separating even from the first day to about 3.5 years. So you can see the curve. The red one is the head-to-head repair group, and the blue one is the surgery group. So in summary, I think head-to-head repair has a role in functional secondary MR, but of course, we need more data when it comes to tricuspid regurgitation on my last slide. Moving on to the implantation now. So in the last, UK has now achieved 18 years of transcatheter aortic valve replacement or implantation, as we call it in Europe here, yesterday. And the first center in the UK that actually implanted the TAVI valve was Glenfield Hospital, where I did my structural fellowship. So, and of course, there'll be more transformation of devices, development of multiple devices, which I'm not going to go through today. But what I'm going to talk about with one of the latest devices that just came out recently is the SAVI wire. So this is a wire we use for, it's not just wire. Historically, we use there's some workhorse wire for TAVI, which includes the Confida wire, the Safari wire. You can use the Lundquist wire, or you can use the Amplas stiff wire. So depends on your preference. But traditionally, we go with the Safari wire or the Confida wire. But this wires allows you to pace the ventricle during pacing. The reason why we pace the ventricle is to reduce the rate, to reduce the systolic blood pressure to about 60 millimeter mercury, below 60 millimeter mercury, and that will prevent valve embolization during deployment stage. So that's the reason why we do the pacing. So we pace it so fast to drop the blood pressure. And what is SAVI wire? The difference between this and the other wires we mentioned about is this allows you to pace and allows you to have a continuous hemodynamic measurement of the pressure. So you get an invasive pressure measurement. The monitor is just there. This is within the ventricle, and you got the monitor just there, and it gives you pressure gradient across the valve and tells you pre-valve deployment, post-valve deployment, what the pressure gradients are. And this is just an example of what it looks like. And the red line is the aortic pressure, and the blue line is the ventricular pressure. Of course, when you have enough shoot like that, should be a gradient across the valve. And it should calculate the mean gradient across the valve there. The mean gradient was about 43 there. And of course, after the valve deployment, there should be no gradient, and this is what you get as a trace. This is a new device that just come into the UK in the last, I think, about 6 to 8 months. And so essentially the way you set it up is the same way like we do our standard workers wire. So you put there's a crocodile clips we used to connect with the wire. Put the black one on the tip of the wire, and the red one goes on a needle, which the needle goes into the skin of the patient, and we attach the red one onto. So that makes the contact, and then the black one is like the neutral part. So there's a contact, and then it allows you to paste the patient. And this is an example of what it does. Like, so once this LV simultaneous pressure of LV and aortic pressure, and once you're pacing, you have this quick, fast rhythm there because of pacing. And after pacing, the pressure goes back to how it was. This is just a demonstration of how it looks like before valve deployment. And this is just an expression of how it looks like after you deploy your valve. So there should be no gradient across the valve afterwards. And it gives you continuous measurement of the gradient, as you can see here. And it tells you the pre-valve measurement and the post-valve measurement. There's been a safety and efficacy trial in this. There's no randomized trial in this. I would admit there's no randomized trial in this so far. It's all been none of the observational prospective studies. This SAVE-TAVI study is a study that included about 121 patients in 8 centers in eight European centers, and they used 5 different platforms. Essentially, they were able to demonstrate that the ventricular pacing rate was about 98.3%. And the success of this procedure using this SAVI wire is about 99.2%. And about 99.26% freedom from major complication as well. This is also followed up by a different study in Canada. So this was published in the Journal of Invasive Cardiology in 2024. And this smaller number of patients, about 60 patients, they looked at the same thing as well. And you can see, appreciate 98% have pacing using the LV pacing, rapid pacing, and 100% safety with success in terms of delivery of the valve, and successful display of pressure gradient was about 95%. So, and then this Canadian study, they look more into preference of the operators who are doing this valve procedure to see what is their preference. As I mentioned before, these are some of the standard workhorse wire we use. The blue one is the sapphire wire, and the orange one is the confident wire made by Boston Scientific. And the London Quist wire is a quite stiff wire. We use it for very, very calcified or very tortuous vessel to straighten out the vessel or to give more support when you have a kink in the aorta. So that one we use this kind of wire, and the plastic wire as well, which is also some of the workers wire we use. But when compared to the operator experience, 97% of the operator in the study found it to be quite, similar to the standard workers wire, or even better. So I think the SAVI wire is changing. It's going to change practice. Of course, there's a bit of resistance in some of the centers in the UK now because it's quite expensive. They think, how will I spend, pigtail catheter, which costs about £5 to £10, the SAVI wire, which is very more expensive. So yeah, there's been a bit of resistance, I think, but we'll see. Many people will start adopting it because this is changing practice. And then finally, I'll be talking about the FEOPS, the AI model for FEOPS, which actually helps in procedural planning. This is just a picture for left atrial appendage. This is the amulet device. As I mentioned, the upper disc covers the Coumadin ridge there, covers the, gives quite good sealing. And this is the Watchman Flex device, which also helps to close the left atrial appendage closure. And these are what TAVI, transcatheter aortic valve implantation, or TAVR, as it's called in the US, which is transcatheter aortic valve replacement. And these are different. So it helps to plan these procedures as well as mitral procedures as well. So not just these 2 procedures, also helps you to plan in terms of mitral intervention. And it gives you predictive simulation, AI-based anatomic measurements, and also it's a cloud-based platform where you can access it anywhere. So it's quite good. And there's been a study so far, which I could find, was a precise study trial. It's a small number of patients, but not randomized, including about some patients. Essentially, they looked at patients with challenging anatomies, which include bicuspid aortic valve, small annulus, aortic annulus, and severely calcified vessels. In this patient, they are very, very challenging, and this patient have higher risk of root rupture, which we don't want. So, essentially, the FEOPS in this study, they looked at some patients, and they looked at the rate, the procedural planning of the operators to see what's the rate of change after using FEOPS, and there are other indexes that the FEOPS was also able to highlight for us. So in terms of the results show that 35% of operators change their plan after using FEOPS, And there are two reasons for this. 12% was due to change of valve size. One field showed that, okay, there's risk of annular rupture here, or there's risk of, risk of significant pacemaker implantation due to this. And also, of course, there's about 23% change of plan due to target implant depth or height, which is very important because if your depth is too low, there's high risk of pacemaker implant. And so you have to get the right size, right implant height. So that's what the field is there to predict. And of course, the other thing I mentioned was the contact pressure index, which the field is able to predict. If your contact index pressure is low, here is set as 3.5. The risk of you getting a pacemaker implantation after TAVI is low. So these are the number of patients who does not require pacemaker in this study. So their contact index pressure was 3.5, and in the patient who require pacemaker was 16.0, which was quite significant with a P of less than 0.01. Similarly, for paravalvular leakage, that's leakage around the valve, and evidence has shown that if you have more than moderate regurgitation, paravalvular regurgitation, there's a high risk of mortality. So we don't want that. The minimum and maximum we want is about mild. And that's why many of the valve platforms have done this paravalvular seal around your valve, different devices to seal to which sticks to the wall of the old leaflets, and then over time it seals up and prevents regurgitation. So in this study, they did show that if your paravalvular leakage index score is 5.7, you will actually have no risk of paravalvular leakage. But the higher is the number, the more it is for paravalvular leakage. So I think that's where I'm going to stop. And this is future direction, which I think will be happening over the next decade. There'll be more development of smart wearable devices and implantable devices, particularly in the area of monitoring heart rate and breathing for atrial fibrillation, or even monitoring for ventricular tachycardia and things like that. And of course, monitoring of blood pressure as well. There'll be more device in terms of implantable biosensor devices, which would provide real-time measuring, particularly in terms of blood biochemistry, glucose, kidney function, and things like that. And also, of course, when we come to aortic valve implantation, I think there'll be more development of biosensors which will pick up early deterioration of valve function. For example, if there's a thrombus on the valve, or there's a panels formation on the valve, to pick this up, and we can monitor these patients closely, which and then if we need further early intervention or not. I think there'll be more development in this area. In terms of percutaneous coronary intervention, currently there's a solution trial which I didn't include in my study, which is looked into drug-eluting balloons. I think there'll be more development in this area. When angioplasty started in 1976, Andrew Grunstein started with balloon angioplasty, okay? And afterwards, we started with BMT stents in the 1990s, and then from early 2000, we go into drug-eluting stent. Right now, things are going back to drug-eluting balloons. So, and of course, parallel to this, there are other studies going on with bioresorbable drug-eluting scaffold or stents. So this will be bioresorbable over time, meaning that there's no material left behind. So there'll be more development in this area. And in terms of edge-to-edge repair, as I mentioned during my presentation, I did mention that for the tricuspid valve, all the studies we've got so far have not shown any mortality benefit. They only talk about quality of life and symptomatic benefits. I think more studies will be looking into if this actually prevents death. We know that edge-to-edge repair in mitral valve prevents death. We know that it reduces hospitalization for heart failure and prevents death. But there'll be more studies that will be looking into heart-driven endpoints in tricuspid valve edge-to-edge repair. And then finally, there'll be more development in terms of AI-driven analysis for scans for the echocardiogram or cardiac CT or MRI scans, or even amalgamation of some of these models like MRI and CT scan, which will provide more precision-based treatment for patient subselect of patient population, or which will guide in our pre-procedural planning for patient requiring interventions. I think I will stop there, and I'll be happy to welcome any questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Adi. Thanks for that very interesting. Yep. And I think it was very informative, a lot of innovation coming our way. So I think let's look into some of the MDR requirements which might govern some of these innovations and how to get around that. And we have our senior medical writer, Dr. Oscar, going to present on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming here. Now that we have read the clinical aspects and the enormous applications of the cardiovascular medical devices, we will move on to the most tedious part of the webinar. Nonetheless, for all you manufacturers, investigators, and clinicians who are present at this webinar, I have a question. I would like to start with a small poll, and I'm pretty sure you all have a notion about the European Commission and its medical device regulation. So if we could proceed with the poll, I want to know your what do you think or what do you expect about this regulation? Can we move to the poll, please? Yes. So I would like to ask you, what do you think is the most significant trend in the cardiovascular medical devices market over the next 5 years? I know there is a lot of devices that Dr. Oluson explained, but I would like to think which you think will be the most significant, the factor that will contribute the most. So if you could please start choosing and submitting your answers.
We'll give it a few more seconds and then.
Yes, please. Okay, so it seems that most of you uh, believe that the use of AI and machine learning will be the most contributed factor. That is correct, but it's not a complete answer because we're gonna need to consider all of the answers, including expansion into the emerging markets, which most people do not think, but places like Latin America or other Southeast Asia and some parts of Africa are actually becoming more important in the emerging markets due to the aging population. So can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so as I was saying, in the past years, all the cardiovascular and vascular devices are experiencing steady and significant growth as both in the European Union and the USA. This is due, like we said, and Dr. Oluson explained, aging populations, chronic cardiovascular disorders, advancements in the medical technology, and the growth of scientific literature and development. But also, we need to consider the financial fields in this branch of medicine. Both the FDA, the UMDR, and other regulations stand as gatekeepers for innovation. So all of you who are considering or have a developing product in the medical devices industry, you need to understand that to navigate these different pathways, comply with the established normativity, and place a medical device in the market actually means going through these hoops and loops of provided by these regulations. Can we go to the new slide, please? Yes, thank you. So as you can see, there is a trend that's saying that the market is growing. How much? Depends on who you ask. Some polls tell you that the cardiovascular devices is projected to reach and 73 billion it was reached in 2024. And that's billion with a B. Some other polls says that it was supposed that it was a 49 billion US dollars in 23, and they were expected to grow 83% up to the year 2030. So as you can see, some say it will be a 6%, other 8%, doesn't matter. It is fantastic, and it is a lot. So by the year 2029, it is estimated that the volume is expected to achieve a large increase, and the whole market as a whole will be considered valuable around 99.6 billion. This trend has been going on since 2016 when more infrastructure, more resources were committed to this purpose, and it will just continue to grow. Doesn't matter the rate. You just need to understand that this is is growing. Next slide, please. Okay. As you can see here, the top countries in 2025 will be the five bigs, as they call. It's no surprise that the United States it's leading since it's the biggest economy in the world. Japan, although has always been a house of innovation. Germany as well, and we're seeing that China is not far behind. It might overtake this lead, maybe not in 2025, but in a couple of coming years. The United Kingdom is a little bit behind, but it is still there. And this is relevant because all these leading countries, United States, Japan, the United Kingdom now, and China want to get into the European market. So they will need to adequate their strategies in order to put their products into the market. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. So there are promoting factors to this increase. As we can say, the cardiology device market is increasing in the adoption of minimally invasive procedures, and that is a trend that is driven by the desire to reduce the patient trauma, shorten recovery times, and lower the health costs. And I will repeat this: lowered healthcare costs. This is a factor in which both manufacturers and governments are trying to work together. So minimally invasive procedures such as cardiac catheterization, percutaneous coronary intervention are becoming more common and are becoming to be offered by the health systems of several countries. And of course, these procedures, this attention requires especially cardiology devices, catheters, stents, guide wires, and everything that Dr. Oluson mentioned is going to be part of this trend. Also, artificial intelligence, like we asked in the poll, it's going to present also an important part of this. Machine learning and data analytics are to enhance the accuracy and the efficiency of the diagnosis and treatment. So many companies and governments are trying to update the digital technology to enable remote monitoring of patients, and therefore allowing healthcare professionals to continuously track their cardiovascular health and intervene as needed. So the trend is driven by an increasing availability of connected devices and the growing emphasis that is becoming part of modern medicine, which is personalized medicine. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. But as you can see, it all comes with a cost. There is also a financial burden for the cardiovascular diseases. In the European Union itself, the annual cost of the cardiovascular conditions is estimated around 210 billion. That's billion again with a B. Around of this figures, 50, almost half is due to healthcare costs, and the 26, which is around 54 billion, is due to productivity losses. So this is and meaning quotations, a problem that compels both manufacturers and society itself. So as you can see in this pie chart, most of the spending goes into the inpatient care, informal care, pharmaceuticals, and also, as you can see, an important percentage also includes mortality losses and morbidity losses due to this. This is a chart taken from an article called "The Economic Burden of Cardiovascular Diseases." It was published in 2023, and it tries to present a global picture about both the financial and healthcare burden that these diseases are driving into societies. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yes, as you can see in this graph, it is divided between the cardiovascular disease-related costs per capita. As you can see, ranges go from as low as 200 euro per capita up to 1,000. Of course, some countries are going to spend more, and some going to spend less, but they are all spending. What does this mean? Why does Spain is spending less than the Germans, which are the highest spending country in Europe? Well, that depends on the population, on the characteristics of the prevalence of the certain diseases, genetics, many factors. But as you can see, I want you to take from this picture that each and every one of them, it is spending. And saying that per capita it's around 400 euros, that is a lot if you make up the numbers and see this trend. Okay, we move to next slide, please. Okay, so as Dr. Olson's uh, insights provided these insights, you can see that there are four major driving factors that increase to the growing demand, which is the prevalence of cardiovascular diseases, the technological advancements, the aging population, which is becoming a staple of the Western world, including Japan, South Korea, and other Asian countries. Excuse me. And also the government initiatives that are developing various programs to improve the access to cardiovascular healthcare in developing regions. Next slide, please. So what are we waiting for? It is like, all right, if the fruit seems ripe enough for the takeoff, why are we not taking advantage of this? Well, that's where the regulation comes in, and that's where poll number 2 comes in. I would like to pick your mind to see what you think about this next question. Yes, can we present the poll, please? There it is. Okay, so what I really want to know is what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for manufacturers, investigators, and developers in complying with the EU MDR, which is by itself a labyrinth, especially for cardiovascular diseases. So please vote and let us see how is it going. What do you think is the most important factor to keep you back from going to the market? The answer might surprise you, or maybe not, but I think it's pretty uh, self-evident what is the most contributing factor. Okay, should we give it a couple more seconds?
I think we got sufficient responses. Probably it's very close, but
Okay, let's see. Right. Okay, so almost 50% of you guess answered correctly. It is the stringent clinical evidence requirement because there is a catch. Clinical evidence, it's a really big term, and you need to navigate around in order to provide the necessary documentation to get your device on the market. And then I see that people also said the market access delays as a close second, and resource intensive conformity assessments. This is all connected. If you have stringent clinical evidence requirements, that is going to make you have a market access delays. And this will repercute and make you invest more resource in order to get the conformity assessments. So that is why I wanna give you a very broad and brief panorama of how to navigate this regulation, and well, let's see what we can get off it. Can we please show the next slide? Okay. Yes. These are the main, according to the Medical Device Regulation 2017 745. These are one of the main points that are relevant to our cardiovascular medical devices. First of all cardiovascular devices, each and every one that Dr. Olusan mentioned, can be classified as high-risk devices. Doesn't matter, we're talking defibrillators, pacemakers, whatever you want, they're all going to be classified as high risk. Therefore, they're going to be submitted to more stringent regulatory controls. So what does this mean? It means you have to perform a conformity assessment before being marketed. So what's the point of this? Well, it is to ensure that they meet the safety and performance standards. As you can see, we're talking about cardiovascular diseases. This is not easily done. Try to demonstrate with clinical evidence that you meet safe, that your device is safe, and it can be considered state of the art. It is a really comprehensive and resourced investment and resource sucking procedure. And it doesn't end there. Once you have got your device in the market, then you need to continue with post-market surveillance to monitor the performance and the safety of the device for the whole lifetime of the device. So that means until you establish when the device stopped being useful, you need to look for any reports of accidents, incidents, or adverse events related to your device. That's why you need to attach yourself or be near companies and notified bodies that can help you undertake this. Can we move to next slide, please? Okay, these are the articles to comply. In summary, there are 7 of them, as I call them, the 7 deadly sins. Each of them has one particular obstacle to hurtle through. For example, definitions, you say, okay, that's pretty simple. The thing is, the regulation is not that specific about how to define a medical device. It could mean from eye drops to the most complicated stent or wire, guide wire that Dr. Olosano explained. Then you have to define the scope, which means where is your device fits into this whole market and this whole area of medicine. Article 10 states the obligations of the manufacturer, which from there derives all of these. You need to perform a conformity assessment. You need to do a clinical evaluation. Then you need to continue with the surveillance system. And then after doing all of this, you need to provide a periodic safety update report. And depending on the device, it could be every 2 years, every 3 years, depending on the complexity and the disease you're working. So this is really extenuating work to have your device there. Of course, if you do it right, the profits are going to be there. But it requires a very, very, how you said, stringent, very delicate process in order to keep your device on the market once it's stated there. Can we move to the next slide, please? My advice is don't even bother with them. Some manufacturers try to do it on themselves with more or less results varying from totally being rejected to being accepted. My advice is for you to leave this regulation to the experts and focus on the development and clinical evaluation of your device. As you can see here, this is roughly what the EU Commission wants. Wants a fully classified device. You need to provide all the technical documentation in order to make people who are not engineers, they are not clinicians, to understand how your device work. You need to provide a clinical evaluation, and this means you need to look for all the literature or even conduct your own studies, clinical trials, to demonstrate the device safety and the performance of the device, which can be, we're talking about months, if not years, in order to get all the relevant information for your own device. You need to involve a notified body. because you cannot, you can present your own clinical evaluation to the competent authorities, but it's better if you do it through a notified body, because either if it's independent organization, they must review the technical documentation, the clinical evaluation, and conduct audits and inspection to ensure you are compliant. And in the end, well, you'll get the declaration of conformity, which is that the notifier approves and therefore issued this declaration conforming, stating that the device meets all the regulatory requirements. This is more easily said than done. And once you did all this labyrinthic procedure, then you get the CE marking. Your device is affixed with that, and it means it complies with all the regulations. But like I told you, this is a catch. Once you do this, you need to continue providing reports and establish a PMCX activities to remain in the market. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. And this is where the troubles that truly lay, because we have all these current challenges in the regulation. Like we said, stringent requirements, it is resource intensive. Your product may be recalled, or maybe your product was not recalled, but other similar products did. So you need to be paying attention what's going on in the market. Other thing is that the European Commission could surprise us with any regulatory updates, and then your device might switch in classification, and you'll need to adjust according to those changes. And all this ends up causing market access delays or having your product removed from the market. Can we move to the next one, please? So there are mitigating strategies, of course, especially in having a robust clinical evidence, conduct comprehensive clinical protocols where you can gather high quality data. It's a way of preventing more than fixing up problems with your device. If you also establish an efficient resource allocation strategy in which you can prioritize resources for critical areas such as clinical trials and compliance documentation, you're going to save a lot of time and, of course, a lot of money, because you won't have to redo that. Of course, if you strengthen the quality management system, which this manufacturer is required to do, you will be more secure in saying that you'll be able to identify and mitigate any potential design flaws or any manufacturing defects earlier. Can we move to the next one? Regulatory updates. It's already hard enough for manufacturers, investigators, clinicians to do the best they can to ensure their device is as good as they claim it to be. So keeping up with regulatory updates is better left to the people who dedicate on this in order to be able to participate and anticipate any changes and stay ahead of them. You need to think, this is especially a bit hard with manufacturers, that you have to think that this is a flexible process. It is good practice to be adaptable, because things can be quickly modified in response to any regulatory guidelines. So you need to think that this is it's not a linear process, but a back and forth or circular process in which one step feeds into the other one. Can we move to the next? Okay, so in conclusion, I might say that there are three things I want you to get from all this blah 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 that I'm saying. Is cardiovascular medical device market, it's gonna keep on growing, no matter what. Maybe not as expected, but it's gonna keep growing worldwide. So it's gonna have substantial financial implications for healthcare systems. Number two, the EU regulation is going to remain stringent, and it's not going to go away. And three, to navigate these challenges, I suggest the manufacturer must invest in having compliance strategies that are robust enough and that they stay informed about any regulatory changes. Can we go to the next step, please? So to sum things up, there is not a lot. There's tons of things to do, but the navigating about all this regulation, there is a way to be found. Next slide, please. So